Welcome to my YouTube channel where we demonstrate and discuss everything related to theatrical and entertainment production crafts. Please subscribe to get the latest updates, posts, and demonstrations. While I will focus primarily on safety in the shops and comprehensive training and operating procedures for tools and machinery, I'll also demonstrate and discuss practical applications like flat and platform construction, scene painting, and more. If you'd like to see something specific, please let me know in the comments. Once again, please subscribe and power up the alert bell to get the most up-to-date notifications about new content. We're going to talk about attachment methods for attaching your pieces of 1x6 or 1x5 1/4. Because 1x6 is usually 5 1/2, but we are cutting our pieces to 5 1/4 for platforms. We're going to do several different ways of attaching things, all using screws and not using staples. There's 2 or 3 things you need to be kind of aware of when you're screwing 1x together in making your platforms, and to prevent splitting and to deal with dry wood and old wood and recycling old wood. Remember, your 1x6 should be ripped to 5 1/4 inches, because that 5 1/4 plus 3/4 inch on your plywood is going to add up to 6 inches. And that 6 inches makes it real convenient for stacking platforms and making them consistent 6-foot steps in that configuration. Of course, we're going to do other configurations. We're not always going to do that, but we want to have that option should we need it. If we have all of our platforms with 5 1/2 inch 1x6 plus 3/4 inch plywood, then all of our platforms are 6 1/4 inches, and now suddenly we can't stack them on top of each other at 6-inch rises and get that consistency. We have to build custom platforms. It's just a convenient way to have that option available. We know where platforms are going to be odd sizes. They're often going to be in increments of 8 and not increments of 6. That's more common, but we want to have that option available. We have some old recycled 1x from previous platforms. We're going to assemble some of this in a variety of different ways. Some of it has holes in the end, so we can reuse those holes. Some of them aren't conveniently placed. This one's probably the best placed, but it looks like there might be a slight angle and kind of pushing the edge. But let's do that. So if I'm attaching these 2 pieces and I'm reusing material, of course I can always reuse the holes and reuse what was there before. That's going to be real convenient. I almost always get one in there flush right where that screw is, and then I worry about tweaking this and getting it fine-tuned after I get that first one in. You'll see me do that on all of these assemblies. This screw is going to miss. Or barely miss, or barely hit. Whoever assembled that previously wasn't very accurate. I just drew a line here. That's the thickness of space we've got. We don't need to crowd the edge. We also don't want to crowd the inside and shoot off into the middle of the 1x. So I'm going to start a new one right here. I could start right there and I'll fight with that hole there, or I can slightly shift up or slightly shift down. I don't want to crowd this corner and I don't want to crowd that corner. So I'm going to go right there. As always with your screws, make them flush with the surface or slightly below the surface. We don't want them proud, we don't want them sticking up. They need to be sunk down below. These 3 are a little bit crowding the edge here. Whoever assembled this previously didn't have their sense of spacing, and if you don't have a good sense of spacing, go ahead and mark it. Go ahead and mark that with a piece of 1x. Give yourself a line. And shoot for the center. The center is here. These are just slightly off center. Those two are not too bad. This one's too close to the edge. If we're reusing these, I'm going to go for the middle one. Get that flush. It's also got an angle going on it. It's got a slight angle. And that's angling it the wrong way. We're already pushing the edge of not being close enough to center, and we're angling it that way. So reusing this hole is probably a bad idea. Get that first one in always and make sure it is flush. If that first one is not flush, then none of the other screws are going to be flush, because if that one has a gap, then when you put the second screw in, that gap is going to be held by the two screws now. So you need to get that first one always flush. Put in the bottom one. And I think this one is a little bit still working. So that's an option to reuse the screws that are in your wood already from your previous recycled lumber. Let's say I'm recycling lumber and it's old wood. This wood came off of a platform that may be 10, 15 years old. I don't really know how old it is. So it's going to be dried out and brittle. I start putting holes in there and it's more likely going to split, especially if I'm right here at the edge. Just for visible purposes, I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to shoot for that middle, right there, and right there. Again, I don't want to crowd this corner. If I crowd this corner, I'm just going to split this off. So I want to avoid that altogether, and I want to avoid all of that together. I'm hoping this is going to split on me so you can see what happens when you're using old wood. No guarantee. If you want to get it started, you can always put it flat like this. Get your screws started. Get them lined up. That might be easier. Just pick one of the screws, doesn't matter which one. And I did not get a split. I was hoping for a split. And I'm not. Getting lucky. Old wood, I got real lucky. If I am getting splitting wood and I'm worried about it, one of the things I can do instead of going straight in like this, I can kind of toenail it in and go on an angle. But you've got to get the right angle. If you start over here too far, you're going to miss. And if you start here too close, you're going to come out the other side. So you want that right there, something like that. That will grip, that will miss. That's going to stick out the side. Of course, when I do this angle, that's also going to want to, the diagonal pull is going to want to shift this wood slightly over. So I'm going to have to fight that as well. It's usually best if you can get your wood locked into place with a straight screw and then put in the angled ones. Or you just have to hold it in place and hope for the best. So sometimes when I'm working with old wood, I'll start like that, at an angle. And now I'm further away from the edge, but I'm coming in at an angle and I'm clipping into that piece. That's going to help prevent excessive splitting. But I still need to get my screws all the way below the surface of the wood. I'm having success getting these screws in because they are all coarse threaded screws. We're working with wood, we want to be using coarse threaded screws. We don't want to be using the fine thread screws, especially the fine thread 1 5/8, because you're going to fight with those fine thread screws. You're going to struggle to get them to sink. You're going to struggle to get them through all the wood, and you're going to more likely strip the wood out. So I had no trouble sinking those coarse threaded screws. This is a fine thread screw. And now I may not have any trouble with the fine threaded screws, but when you're in difficult positions, you will struggle with the fine threaded screws. I didn't have any problem with that. But let's say I'm working up here and trying to get in there, or I'm underneath something. The installation of that screw is all in my muscles and my strength at that point. I've got no advantage from the fine threaded screws. The fine threaded screws are designed for drywall attaching to metal studs. And when you use it in lumber, you just create more headache and more struggle for your carpenters. So I'm having success with this, but I am in an easy position. I've got all my body weight going for me. I'm not doing anything in a complicated or awkward position. If you're stuck driving in those fine threads, maybe you want to pre-drill. So I'm going to pre-drill. Got a couple options here for a pre-drill. This is an 1/8 inch drill bit. I'm going to do that because that's what people tend to grab, and my preference is to not use the 1/8 inch, but use the bigger one, and I'll explain why. Because now that I've drilled that 1/8 inch screw, my screw won't go through there, and now my threads are biting into this piece as well as biting into this second piece. All I really need is for this screw head to compress this piece and the threads to attach to the bottom piece. So that's the one that I really want the threads to attach to. If I need to pre-drill this bottom piece, I need to have a smaller drill bit. But if I'm just pre-drilling this top piece, I can go through and get a bigger drill bit. This one's 11/64, or the 5/32 is also okay. 11/64 gives you just a little bit more wiggle room. So I only want to screw that into here. I don't want to put that into this one because I need that wood to be completely ready to receive the screw. So now when I put my screw in, my screw goes in all the way. That pre-drilling is going to make it easier to drive these fine threaded screws. But now I just stripped out my fine threaded screws. So that didn't work out at all, did it? If I use the coarse threaded screws, that sunk it together. Because I was using the fine threaded screws, it's real easy for those fine threads to get in on the other side. And you see my fine threads, there's only 10 or 12 threads there that are biting into this piece. It just doesn't have enough strength to sink and compress. Whereas the coarse threads, it's a little bit more aggressive. It's going to sink that down. It's going to grip into this piece, and it's less likely to strip out. That's why you want to go with the coarse threads and not the fine threads. Now I've already stripped out a hole in that first one, so I can't switch up to a coarse thread because that's just going to spin as well, I think, maybe. Yeah, it's just spinning as well. But I can put a coarse thread down here. The only thing that I can do for this top one is go for a longer screw. I'm going from 1 5/8 to a 2 inch screw, and that should allow me to grip in there and bite. But that's stripped out too. Basically, it's all concocted. I am just going to have to abandon that hole and put another one in next to it. So if your screw strips out, just take it out and put another one in next to it. Always make sure you have at least 3 screws on each connection of these platform corners. And we're all used to using Phillips bit screws, but I am preferring these T25 Torx screws. They're much easier to get a grip on with your bit and less likely to strip out and less likely to slip and smash your fingers, less likely to strip out the screw head, less likely to strip out the driver bit. Just much happier with those all the time. It's what I use exclusively at home, and I'm trying to get the shop here to switch over, but I haven't convinced everyone yet. Look at that, no stripping, no slipping. So much more control with the Torx bits than with the others.